So I know that people might be coming in, but I like to honor the people that are here, so we will start on time. As I said, if you are online, you might want to go grab someone to talk to. If you are alone in the room, or you might want to be texting with a friend. This session is going to be about asset-based ministries, so the concepts of asset-based community development as you start to discern what ministries you want to do in your neighborhood. So the goal for our time is that you walk out with some tools to start making plans. I'm a very tactical, tangible human being. I don't like just thinking about the theoretical. I went to a very liberal arts college, and so I did that for 4 years, and now I'm in tangible land. My name is Tamara Plummer. I should probably say that. I work at Episcopal Relief and Development, which is the nonprofit arm of the Episcopal Church. So we are your compassionate response to human need around the world. And we use the methodology of asset-based community development for all of our projects. In the United States, we only do disaster preparedness and response because allegedly we are a developed country. So we do not do development work in the US, but we do development work around the world. And we do disaster work around the world as well. And we work through our Anglican partners and Episcopal communities to figure out what response the church can perform. Our staff is 50 people. We work in about 40 countries. So you can see that we are not the ones that are there to save the people. We are there to walk with you as you save yourself. So that is our organization. We're going to do a little Bible study. What is ABCD, which you heard a lot about yesterday, so that will be very short. And then how to ABCD, and then hopefully you'll walk out with some specific tools about what your next steps will be. All right, start with some Bible study. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There is not a jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." So we're going to do a Bible study in a little bit of a different way. It's a way that our international team works with communities when they go in. First part is facts. So what happened in the story? This is the audience participation time. Her husband died. And what happened after her husband died? The debt collectors came asking for some money. What did she do? She goes to Elisha, the prophet, the person that's supposed to solve all the problems, said, "Help me out." What did Elisha say to her?
He asked what she had.
"What do you have?" was his first question. Well, how can I help? But then he quickly goes on to, what do you have, right? What happens next?
She says nothing, and then a jar of oil.
She says, "I have nothing." I will just pause for a second. I work on the Episcopal Asset Map, and it collects data about people's ministries and what they're doing in their communities and their worship times. And I will say to somebody, "What does your church do?" And they will say to me, "Oh, we don't really do anything." So I say to them, so you open your church, you have service, you close the church and you leave. And they're like, well, like we have a prison program where we visit some folks. We collect some clothes and give it to people in need. We have like a food program where we feed the college students across the street, about 100 a week. And I'm like, so then nobody has nothing because you have life. If I am talking to you, you have life at minimum, so you have something. I always find it hilarious. So she says she has nothing, but she has something. So then she has the jars. What does Elisha tell her to do?
Go out into the community.
Go out in the community and get in debt some more from her neighbors, right? The neighbors give her something, obviously. And then what does she do next? She discovered some oil in her house, poured it out, kept flowing, till all the jars were filled. A lot of folks will say, God's abundance, God's abundance. God's enough is what I will say. That the goal here is not to be wealthy to the point where you have caused other people to not have enough. That God's abundance is about giving us enough for us to be able to do what we need to do, right? So enough. And then she sells it and has enough to live. The next step would be association. So is anything in that story resonating with you in your own life? And then if we had many hours, I would ask you to tell me a story about when you felt like either Elisha or the woman, or what character in that story do you feel associated with? And then you would tell a story about that time in your life. And then meaning, explore the deeper meaning. What are the deeper concepts or issues going on in the story? How does your story and the story of the Bible deeper connect you to the meanings? And then last is action. So then what does that incite you to do in your own life? So you do some fact-finding, some association. What does that mean? And then what does it call you to do? So this is toolbox number 1, FAMA method of Bible study if you are in a community that especially is not ready to go outside. So FAMA. We're gonna skip what ABCD is. ABCD is, you have some stuff, use it to meet human need. So yes, the Bible study is asset-based community development. A little insider training tip, you make people do something, and then you explain what you did, and then they take it from there. So just if you're doing trainings. So how do we discover our assets? Now we're gonna talk to each other, so if you don't have a neighbor, you need to find one. We use this in our disaster work as we work with congregations to discern how they will respond after disaster. So you're gonna get with your neighbor, and this is called a one-to-one conversation. It does not have to be one-to-one, so if you wanna join the ladies up here, okay. So those are some other ones, but we're gonna skip because we are on a time crunch. Okay, so posted activity. The way that we describe assets is using the 5 Ps. So that's people, property, programs, purse, and posture. So people, who are the humans in your church or your neighborhood or your community? What's the property that you own or the places that you have access to? What are the programs that you have? So that would be your ministries, your outreach, your organizations, your purse, your money, finances. And then your posture, I think, is the most important one. I think it's really key. If something bad were to happen in your neighborhood, and you think about your congregation or where you worship or your neighborhood, your general ministry context, would the people shut themselves in the upper room and pray that Jesus comes? Or would they rush out, open the doors, and welcome everybody to come in and charge their phones? That's posture. What is the way in which one would respond naturally? You may have a bunch of grumpy old ladies in your church, not that it happens at anybody's church, but who there's some that sometimes snipe at me at my own church. But if I actually had a problem, when my dad died, when things bad happened, the first thing they did was call, write a card, are you good, are you okay? They're gonna come to my aid. So that's the posture. So think about those things. So now thinking about those 5 things, P's, because we're small enough, we're not gonna break into 3s and 4s, we're gonna break into 2s. One of you is gonna have 3 minutes, and so folks online, I apologize for this silent moment. You're gonna have 3 minutes, and I'm timing it, to talk about your church. The other person is going to listen deeply to what the person who's talking is saying. And what you're listening for are those 5 P's. Now, if somebody says, my church is filled with retirees who are all old and it's terrible and everything's horrible, your job as a listener is to listen for what the gift is in that moment. A bunch of retirees have a bunch of time. My mother is a retiree who ran a whole office and who loves to garden and who knows how to run meetings and who knows how to budget and who. So that's not a deficit. There's a gift in that group of people. So as you listen to the person talk about their congregation, and I am getting my timer, you will have 3 minutes. We'll see how much time we have after the 3 minutes, because I know how you people do. The Episcopal Church, I've done this a lot. Sometimes you're compliant, sometimes we're not. So stopwatch, the alarm is on. No, timer is on. I'm gonna give you 3 minutes, so one person's gonna talk, and then we're gonna switch and get another person. Yep, so 3 minutes, go. If you are the listener, you are taking notes. If you're online, I want you to be thinking about who are the beautiful people, what's the property, what are the programs, what's the purse, and what's the posture. You have 1.5 minutes. If you're online and you want to tweet out some of your gifts, we'd love to see them using the hashtag for the conference. time is up. Great. So I want to hear some of the gifts. As you look at and think about the conversation you had or the listening that you did, what's one gift that really stood out to you? Good leadership.
I heard a posture of a church in Austin that took in people during hurricanes.
A posture of openness and welcoming.
Outreach programs.
A lot of programs in the neighborhood. Intentionality in use of funds. Yes, that's a hard one.
Doers, not just talkers.
Doers, not talkers. So there are a lot of gifts. And you can imagine that if you were with your community, you could probably do this for about an hour, where you just go through it and you could name out the people. Now I'm gonna give a little less time to the switchers. So if you did not get to speak about your community and you really wanted to, I'm gonna give you 2 minutes. I'm sorry. I'll give you 2 whole minutes. I'm gonna switch. And what you would do, because why we call it the post-it activity, is you would be writing down one gift per post-it and putting them on the table and laying them out so that you could see all the gifts. And the goal would be many, many gifts. So we're gonna switch. You got 2 minutes. Go. If you're just joining us, we are talking about gifts of your community using the 5 Ps: people, purse, property, posture, and programs. You're down to about 20 seconds. Thank you all. We are at time. I'm checking in any learnings or moments of inspiration based on the gifts you heard? Yeah.
One of the learnings for me was that how you talked about it earlier, but you kind of skipped over it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was fine.
Yeah.
But I realized that there are a lot of social connections in those places that they need to be explored. Because that was one of the gifts. But so when you find these things, it's interesting. I was like, oh man, you gotta go. It's gonna take time to explore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So a couple ways that people have done this before. They've either done it at like their vestry meeting or a leadership group meeting. I've seen people do it where you give everybody in the congregation a Post-it and you say, how has this church blessed you in your life? And as they leave church that Sunday, they just put that Post-it up, and then the leadership would then look at those to see if they missed something. And you can also leave it up from like 8 o'clock to 10 to 12 so that the next week people can see what the different gifts are from each service, which I think is a beautiful way for a church to start to change the posture to a more we do have things here, and this place is giving you life, or else you wouldn't show up every Sunday. One of the main reasons I go to church on Sunday, because I work for the church now, so I go to a lot of church, is because of Mr. Blemon. Cedric Blemon, who I pick up at the nursing home, and he says inappropriate and sometimes wildly amazing things, both at the same time, is a blind man, and I always say to him, "You are the only reason I go to church, Mr. Blemon." He says, it's okay, and I'm like, no, you're keeping me honest, so Mr. Blemon is why I go to church on Sunday. So once you fall in love with Jesus, you fall in love with your church, you figure out what you have, now you are ready to talk to your neighbors, right? So we're listening for the call. God is already up to something in our neighborhood. We are just figuring out what God is already up to. So one of them is prayer walks. These one-to-one conversations, I like them to be timed because introverts don't talk. Extroverts talk too much. I'm one of those. I'm going to let you guess which one. And so if you time it, it allows space for the person who's introverted to speak, because an extrovert does not like silence and will often cut the person off. And what you do when you're in the listening, especially if you are someone who is inclined to cut people off, if you really feel like you have to speak, you get to say 3 words: tell me more, the TM squared model. So as the person is speaking to you, you pause, there's a pause, tell me more. And they will inevitably do that. So you allow that for the time. Also in one-to-ones, the goal is not just to listen, but also to speak. I think sometimes, particularly if we are in a place where there's an imbalance of power, which is pretty much all the time, the liberal folks in us want to get from the other person, right? I've been in places where white folks want to ask me my story, right? But they give me nothing in return. So then why should I give you something? There is no trust in this relationship because I've given up all of myself to you and then you give me nothing. That is using people, that is not being present with people. So one-to-one, the FAMA method that we just did before, facts, associations, meaning, action. Prayer walks, there's a link. So, if you are in the room and you want this slideshow with the links, please sign up and sign in. Oops, sorry. So prayer walks, there's a link on episcopalchurch.org/evangelism, and one of them is the neighborhood prayer walk that walks you through the step-by-step method. A lot of folks have talked about it, but this is one of those methods. What is helpful to think about as you are on the prayer walk is what glasses you're walking out of your church with. So it would be really helpful to get grounded in that asset-based approach. If I describe my neighborhood, I'll describe the walk from the train station to my house. I live in New York City, I live in Brooklyn, in Flatbush, majority Caribbean neighborhood, starting to become gentrified. It's close to the park. There's about 5 new apartment buildings being built in my neighborhood. There's limited parking. There's still some crime. There's a methadone clinic nearby. There are also 3 hospitals. Lots of residents moving in because one of the hospitals used to have many sites and now they've downgraded just to my neighborhood, so now there are all these residents living in my building. There's a lot of stores, a lot of shops, a lot of fresh fruit and vegetable places, grocery stores, good public transit, buses and trains, diversity of people, many languages spoken, also lots of trash. Sometimes really weird smells, some stray cats, right? So when I'm telling you that story, we can tell story 1 when you're walking in the neighborhood. There's high rates of crime, there's homelessness, there's this, there's that, everything's terrible. You can tell story 2, which I did. There's great clinics, there's communities that love each other. There's a really good block party that happens at the co-op next to my building that does keep me up, so stay away. Labor Day weekend, you do not hang out in my neighborhood or else you will not sleep. It's because it's the Caribbean festival, so everyone's up partying. And the goal here is not to focus on one or the other, because the truth is that both stories are true. So when you're thinking about asset-based model, the goal isn't just to say, look at all the beauty, everything's great. The goal is to say that both stories are true. But if we focus on what is terrible, if I just told you that there's crime and the neighborhood used to have a lot of gangs and this was terrible and da-da-da was terrible and this was terrible and all these damn people are moving in and they don't belong there, right? That is going to be I'm going to create a different world for us to start building relationship on than if I pay a little bit more attention to story 2, while honoring the truth of story 1. That my landlord says to me, I raised your rent because you can pay, and there are too many rent-stabilized apartments in this building, so I'm just raising people's rent. I can be mad at the rent stabilization, or I can say, yeah, I can figure out how to afford that, and you're a crazy landlord, so now I'm going to complain about every single thing that you do in this building that's wrong. So, right? So, both stories are true. Building bridges. So once you are starting to know your neighbors, you're engaging with your neighbors, we're building bridges, there's often that person. How many of you are that person? Okay, that's great. No introverts in the room. This is awesome. That we could have that relationship. I took these from a asset-based community development group in England, which I cannot remember right. I think it's called TEAR, T-E-A-R fund. I feel like this is what we do when people walk into our churches. And it's like, and I am the person that comes at blessed be God Father, and I go in peace, and if I'm in a new place. So don't do this, please. There's this one. I'm going to talk, me and Adrienne, whatever Josephine's doing, don't really care. I don't care about her story, because this is the story that's clearly important. I'm so excited! Tell me. Right. Or we can do this. Where both people feel like they're invested and involved and are sharing and are present with each other. So we're thinking about that. That would be how Jesus would do it. And then we connect for collective action. So once we've built relationships, we've talked to our neighbors, we gathered their stories, they've heard our stories, we figured out how we can be in partnership with each other. We do not do this either. This would be a don't do image, which is that I have the money, so I have the strings. Because I have the privilege, I have the strings.
Or I have the answers.
Or I have the answer, so I have the strings.
That's a good point. I just think that is one, as far as in theological term, but in philanthropic term, it is why we don't ever have change.
Right.
I'm a president of the board, but that's how things work.
Yeah.
You have to keep saying it.
You have to keep saying, yes, I do think you have to keep saying, we are not in charge. God is in charge. How do we show up to what God is doing? And then checking in with people. It's an amazing concept. The passive aggressiveness of the church is amazing to me. Like, I'm feeling like there's something going on. I feel like I'm using my privilege right now. I totally get it. Should I stop? What's going on? How can I be helpful? How can I help check in? Thank you. And on this side, if y'all want to. Checking in is often, and then we go back to what are we doing? Our FAMA. We can go back to our FAMA, pick the right Bible study. If you need to open up that hard conversation, do the one-to-ones. Like literally, I'm on repeat. Post-it notes, one-to-ones, FAMA. Like we could just go on cycle throughout the process. And then a big, huge piece of asset-based community development is appreciative inquiry, which is where you are always listening for the Holy Spirit. So it's a questioning process that is about being vulnerable to the Holy Spirit speaking. That is not how our sustainable development folks would call it, but that is what we will say. Scientists would call it that. So if we take back our Bible study, go back to our Bible study, define the problem. So what's our woman's name? The widow. I don't think she actually has a name. The widow. Correct. The women often don't have a name. We'll call her Miss Betty. That's my usual church lady name. So Miss Betty's the widow. She has a problem. The focus of the inquiry is that she has debtors coming for her children, and she doesn't know what to do about that. What gives life? Oh, she has neighbors that really love her enough to give her some stuff. She still has her sons, and they are able to help her and to participate. What do you dream about? What might be? The end of slavery and indebtedness. But what should be is that people will have a system to be able to not get into debt and to get out, and ways to get out of debt when they do get into debt. Or that there is some grace about not taking people's children. And then what will be is I will pour these jars of oil, get these jars of oil, sell them, and make enough money to get out of debt. And then you would start again. So now that she has money, we could start again. Who else in your neighborhood is in debt to these people that will take people's children? Do you know other women that are like you? What could be there? What do you dream for those women? What do those women dream for themselves? How can you walk with them as they try to figure out, maybe they don't have oil, they have something else? Yeah, did you have a
What I
question?
think is totally amazing about the story is the obedience.
The obedience? Say more.
You know, whatever we said do, it wasn't questioned. You know, the obedience what really set her free with her faith with her obedience.
I never thought about that one. That when God said to do, when Elisha said to do something, she actually listened to him, is what he said. She obeyed.
It's told about his posture.
His posture. That does tell us about his posture. I'm going to pause because we've covered a lot of things. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay. Do y'all know this image? How many people see the old lady? You see the old lady. Can you point it out? Because I can never see the old lady. Yeah, like come. Yeah. And how many people see the young woman with a bonnet? So in appreciative inquiry, we're not saying that the young lady or the old lady are ugly. And we are allowing space for both sites to be in the room. The person that sees the old lady and the person that sees the young woman need to be in the room. So what we did before, definition, discovery, dream, design, destiny, and delivery. And then in that process, we're always centering a core of positivity. So there is gentrification happening, there's rent stabilization that is not happening. There are wealthy people, there are not so wealthy people, all those things, we've done that discovery. What do we want to do now to resolve this issue? And our goal is that all people have fair housing and access to housing. That's our goal. And that is always going to be the center of the conversation. So every time somebody goes to a negative place, well, the goal is that all people have access to housing and clean, fair housing that is affordable. That's what we go back to as the center of the conversation. So when you're having that conversation, if you are facilitating it, you are reframing constantly back to that positive core. Listening with your heart and your ear. And then the last piece is, and you'll see the link is it's specifically about disasters, but literally you could do this with any issue that's happening in your community. So you've done the assets, you figured out what some community needs are, and then there's a place that lives in the middle, and that is how you respond. So what you would do with that posted activity is you would put all your gifts in order. You would say, okay, here's some needs that are happening in our community, and then you would just start matching. And you would start to discern where you want to start. So I always go back to that image. There is enough. Not always abundant, but there is always enough. Any questions before we go to takeaways? I snapped too fast.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a difficult question.
Yeah, please.
I was in a parish in the past where the rector made all the decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and she managed to manipulate absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start to change those dynamics when you don't have them?
Okay, so here's what I do sometimes is I listen to a lot of priests complain that laity don't do what they say they're going to do. That lay people are not going to do what they say they're going to do. I would also, so they feel the need to take over so that it goes right. Because failure is not an option. And so there's a lot of anxiety wrapped up in the ability to control all the things and to manipulate all the things into the dream that they have created for themselves of the place. Your job as a person that attends that church is to give feedback. We often do not give our priest feedback. There's no formal process for giving feedback. I would start with a one-to-one coffee. Like, hey, and don't do what my mama did. I'm sorry, mommy, for calling you out. My mama wrote a 10-page email to her priest about what she didn't like. While she may have been right, that's probably not going to get him to change. I would start with a coffee and just say, hey, would love to talk to you about what you dream for this place. And find out what they dream for the place. Why is this important? What are the things that are important to you? How did you come into the priesthood? What are the stresses that are happening beyond the building? Now, if your priestess want to have coffee, I would start to write a letter to the bishop. But because they should at least want to have coffee with you, right? What do they dream? Why do they dream that? Where do they want it to go? What have they heard from congregants about what have been past problems that they're trying to address? Like, do that discovery process, that define, and then be honest. Like, I hear you. As someone who sits in the pew, that is not what we dream. And so I would just strongly suggest that we have a coffee hour where we just get to talk to you, where we do some brown bag lunching. And I'm not saying it's going to work. Some people are just stubborn. But I think if you start with a posture of assuming that the person has a dream for the place and that their goal is not to destroy the church, if that's their goal, is to not get themselves out of a job, let's start from there. How do I push some space for you? Oh, you dream this for the church? Do you know that Josephine was a lawyer? And she actually is really good at drafting proposals. You don't have to do it, actually. And I can talk to her. I'm so happy to talk to Josephine and get her on board with this, because it sounds like that would make everyone's life a lot easier. What is the social capital already? So you might have to know the gifts before you go talk to your priest, too, to push them. You might need to know what some stuff is. Yes, ma'am.
I guess that we're formal meeting, when you say coffee, that's the better way to do things and address things instead of writing letters and documentation, presenting your problem, you have this person because some people are different. But one thing about a bishop, priest, reverend, prophet, when the vision is of God, it's going to come together.
Mm-hmm.
We had a vision and God was in it, and it came to pass.
Mm-hmm.
We took history by storm. When Obama was in office, and even some of the things while Trump was still in office, but everybody just fit in. And that's how you know it was of God. So you just have to sit down, that way you don't offend them, and
because we are, and how do we find the gifts of the body? And just I think a lot of people assume that clergy are always getting their fill and are finding ways to feed themselves. And especially if you are in rural communities, it is really hard for folks to find ways to fill themselves that are not destructive. Why do we think we're a church that sometimes deals with some substance abuse issues and some other issues? Because people are not finding positive ways to fill themselves. So they may not even recognize that they've been shifted outside of what the dream is. So we're gonna end with some takeaways, because I want you all to write some stuff down before you leave. Words create worlds. Inquiry creates change. So anytime you want to change something, the first thing you do is ask a question. So when that priest is doing something that is pushing the agenda to the right and everybody else was trying to go to the left, hey, I see you're moving to the right. Tell me more about that. What you focus on grows. Images inspire action. So that's why I had those pictures that we used, so you could find other images that you could use that same FAMA method with actual images. So you could take pictures and use that FAMA method to do that. Positive questions lead to positive change. That's the appreciative inquiry. Start with easy wins. So I would not, if you're starting something brand new, I wouldn't start with, we want to have a block party with 10,000 people. How about see if 5 people will show up at the coffee shop? How about I have just like a beer, boozy brunch after, I don't know, whatever. Like whatever it is that works for your community that is not abusive. Easy. Make sure that it is a call of the whole community. So as Hugo said, if that priest is the only one that thinks somebody said to me, you're not a leader if you're the only one walking. I often think if we look at our procession, right? The rector, the bishop, the priest, they're at the back. The cross is at the front. Then our prayers, if you're in a super formal church with the incense. Then the light, right? So it's actually our prayers, the light, and then the cross. The people singing out the message, people delivering the services. At the very back is the priest. The last person is the priest.
Can I add?
Yeah,
Take pictures.
take pictures.
Share pictures of you doing these things. One of the things that's been helpful in our community is, again, kind of reminding ourselves of who we are. And so we'll take pictures of doing things and then share them back to us, whether it's in the e-news or on Facebook or whichever. So it's
Documenting what you're doing while you're doing it.
That's why we come to church.
Yeah. To remember. And document not just the success at the end, but the process. Be appreciative, do not erase pain. So you can appreciate, I was just at a talk with Diane Butler-Bass, and she said, we are not grateful for oppression, but we can find the grace in the oppression. So you do not have to be grateful for the pain. It's not like, woo, people can't eat, no access to housing. That's not appreciative inquiry. But what is the opportunity and the grace in that thing? Build partnerships and dream together. God is out there at work in the world. Join the group. So what is our toolbox? Our 5 Ps: post-it activity, FAMA, appreciative inquiry, prayer walk, one-to-ones. That's all we have done. Rinse and repeat. So it is 3 weeks into Easter season. We have 3 weeks left, 4 weeks left, something like that. Great Easter is 50 days. I don't know how many weeks that works out to. So by Pentecost, your goal is to take a piece of paper, if you have one near you. You're going to write down one tool you will use in your community in the next couple of weeks. You are going to put your email address on that thing, and you are going to exchange with your neighbor, and they will set an email to remind you that you are going to do that thing. I'm not joking. I'll just wait. you're gonna hold each other to it. I'm not coming to save you, remember. And remember, aim low. Aim lower, always aim lower. A specific task, yes. I will have a one-to-one with my rector about what I learned at Missional Voices. I will have coffee with the person that I pass on the street every single morning. I will say good morning to 5 people the next time I leave my house. I don't care what it is, but you gotta pick one concrete action that you can accomplish before Pentecost. Okay, I will do my 5-second commercial because we're almost at time for church. So my 5-second commercial is that my actual job is that I work on the Episcopal Asset Map. It is a very catchy name. So episcopalassetmap.org. But if you are a part of an Episcopal community, you are building these ministries, you have figured out what they are, I encourage you to add that story to the map. So the way the map works, anybody can go on and add information about a place. The only thing on the map currently is Episcopal places. So it's the idea of doing, another part of this is asset mapping, where you map the different gifts around your neighborhood. That's one thing you can do on the prayer walk. So this is mapping those gifts in the Episcopal Church. So it has service times, descriptions of churches, and ministries. That is all searchable. And the goal is that you don't have to have a login to add information. You do have to have a login to approve the information. So, yeah.
How are you attempting to get that information? Have you circulated that?
Yeah, we have about 200 plus map administrators that are, so every diocese has to have at least one, and they can have up to 3. And the goal is to get those people motivated to spread the word. So I work with those folks to help spread the word locally. I come to things like this. Shortly, this will become the Finder Church on episcopalchurch.org. So in the future, what will happen is if you go to the Episcopal Church website and you're like, why does my information not show up? Because you didn't put it there. So the way that will work in the future is if you want people to know about your church and to find your church, you will add that information. A beautiful story was one of the women, I knew a woman emailed through the website. She drove past her church that she went to as a child and just remembered her childhood rector, and through the website emailed and said, I wonder what ever happened to Father Barry and how he's doing. If he's still alive, I would love to connect with him. He changed my life. Or another person was trying to find some care for a parishioner whose son was in prison. He was in prison in a different diocese in the same state, and he wanted to know who the contact person was for the prison ministries in that state so that the son would get more visits because the mom couldn't drive 5 hours every weekend. And he could get connected to a spiritual community up there. So that's kind of how it's been used by people that are not Episcopalians often. But if you all don't put your information on it, then we won't know what the gifts are to share with others. So I invite you to do that. And I am at time. So thank you all.